I'm Frances, 24 years old, and right now I live in a small, quiet apartment that feels a million miles away from the home I grew up in. By day, I'm a data analyst, finding stories in numbers and patterns, but the life I've built here is a complete secret to my family. They think I'm just a college dropout, struggling through some dead-end job while my brother lives a life of luxury. And little do they know, I've built something for myself, something I had to fight for, even if it meant making sacrifices for my brother. Before we dive into this story, though, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, home didn't feel like a sanctuary. It was more like a showroom. My mother, Eleanor, an interior design consultant, carefully curated every inch of our lives. It wasn't just the furniture that had to be perfect, or the walls that had to be pristine. It was everything. The color palette was always muted, grays and whites, nothing that could offend the eye. The art on the walls wasn't chosen for its beauty or meaning, but for its potential investment value. We weren't a family. We were accessories in her perfectly designed life. And from the start, it was clear what our roles were meant to be. My brother, Julian, was the centerpiece, the star of the show. He had this golden aura around him, literally. His hair was like a halo, and from his first steps, he was a prodigy. Every little thing he did was a miracle. If he finger painted a smear of brown and green, it was abstract genius. If he kicked a ball anywhere near a goal, he was the next big sports star. My mother didn't just see him as her son. No, to her, he was a masterpiece, the ultimate reflection of her perfection. He was the golden boy. She said it so often, it became his official title. Golden boy, she'd call him, with his smile that made it clear he could do no wrong. And so, he never did. He was showered with praise, with expensive gifts, with opportunities that seemed endless. If he crashed his first car, a brand new convertible she bought him for his 17th birthday, well, it was the road's fault, not his. When he failed 3 classes in one semester, she insisted it wasn't his fault. The teachers were simply uninspired and couldn't recognize his unique brilliance. My role, however, was different. I was the responsible one, the quiet, almost forgettable daughter, the one who never caused trouble, who followed the rules and stayed in the background. My achievements, well, they were just kind of there. Sure, I got straight A's. I won a state-level math competition in 10th grade, but my mother barely acknowledged them. "That's nice, dear," she'd say before immediately changing the subject to whatever new, brilliant idea Julian had for his social media career. I remember winning that math competition, thinking for a moment, maybe this time, this one achievement will catch her attention. But no, it didn't. It was like I didn't exist in the same way he did. He was a star, and I was the backdrop. My accomplishments were always secondary, my whole life. I'd been taught that my primary purpose was to make sure Julian could soar, to be his reliable, steady, and most importantly, invisible backup. The financial disparity was impossible to ignore. Julian's wardrobe was filled with designer labels. His gadgets were always the latest models. His weekends were spent on lavish trips with friends. Trips that our parents funded, of course. Meanwhile, I worked a part-time job through high school just to save up for a decent laptop for college. I was lucky if I could afford a new book or some extra food. I I remember once asking my parents for just a fraction of the allowance Julian got. My mother gave me a lecture on financial responsibility, conveniently forgetting that she had just spent thousands of dollars sending Julian on a networking trip to Miami. It wasn't just about money, though. It was about value. Julian was an investment. I was an expense to be managed. My Aunt Isabel, my mother's younger sister, was the only person who seemed to understand this imbalance. Isabel lived in a small, cozy house filled with mismatched furniture and shelves of books. It was the complete opposite of our sterile, perfectly designed home. During my visits, Isabel actually listened to me. She paid attention when I talked about my dreams, my passion for data, my desire to go to a good university. "You have a brilliant mind, Francis," she told me once, her voice warm and sincere. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for being smart." She saw me for who I was, not just the role I had been assigned, but no matter how much Isabel encouraged me, it felt like the pressure from my family was always there, just waiting to crush me. It was the summer before I left for college that things really started to get intense. I'd been accepted into a prestigious university with a partial scholarship for their data science program. It was my dream, a huge achievement, and yet my family's reaction was lukewarm at best. My father, who had long since ceded all household decisions to my mother, barely grunted his approval. "That's good, I guess," he said, not even looking up from his newspaper. Julian scoffed when he found out. "Data science, that sounds boring. I'm going to be an influencer. That's where the real money is." My mother, though, she had the most bizarre reaction. She sat me down in our pristine living room, her face a mixture of pity and steel. "We're proud of you, Francis, of course," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "But you need to be realistic. This university is very expensive, even with your little scholarship." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Julian is at a very critical point in his career. He needs our full support to build his brand. A lot of his success will depend on his image, the places he's seen, the things he can show his followers." I felt this cold dread creep up my spine. I knew exactly where this was going. "What are you saying, Mom?" I asked, already dreading the answer. She leaned in, her gaze unwavering. "I'm saying," she continued, "that we need you to be a team player. We need you to think about the family as a whole. Julian's success will benefit all of us in the long run. He has the potential to be a star. You have a good head on your shoulders. You'll be fine wherever you go." She was asking me to give up my dream school for a cheaper community college so that the money saved could go directly into funding Julian's brand. The unfairness of it all hit me like a physical blow. I argued. I pleaded. I even created spreadsheets to show how we could afford it if they simply cut back on some of Julian's extravagant spending. But it was like talking to a brick wall. My mother's mind was made up. Julian was a priority. I was a sacrifice. In the end, I managed to get a fragile compromise. I could go to my dream university, but only if I was willing to live with razor-thin financial resources. They would cover tuition and part of my housing, but everything else, the books, the food, the occasional social life was all on me. It wasn't ideal, but I accepted it. I was determined to make it work. I wouldn't let them take this from me. But as I packed my bags, ready to leave for college, I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. My mother had drawn the battle lines. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that the war for my future had just begun, and with it, the emotional toll that would come with the constant battle between what I wanted for myself and what my family demanded from me. The summer before I left for college was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for: late nights spent studying, endless hours in the library, and all the sacrifices I had made just to get this far. I had been accepted into a prestigious university with a partial scholarship for their data science program. This was my dream come true. I had worked so hard for this moment, and when I got the acceptance letter, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. But when I shared the news with my family, I wasn't met with the excitement I had imagined. Instead, I was greeted with something far less enthusiastic. My father, the man who had long ago given up on making any decisions, barely acknowledged it. He didn't even look up from his newspaper when I told him. "That's good, I guess," he said, his voice distant and distracted. My brother Julian barely even reacted. In fact, he scoffed. "Data science, that sounds boring," he said with a dismissive wave. "I'm going to be an influencer. That's where the real money is." His response cut through me like a knife. But I tried to shake it off. This was my moment. I had earned it. But then, my mother's reaction, or lack of one, really threw me off. She didn't congratulate me, didn't ask me about the program or the university. No. Instead, she gave me this look. This look that felt like she was measuring the cost of my dream. It was cold, calculating. She paused, and I could feel the weight of her gaze, like she was about to say something important, something that would change everything. And then she did. She sat me down in our living room in the center of our perfectly designed home. The furniture was pristine, the walls a sterile white, and the air between us felt thick, as if every word mattered. "We're proud of you, Francis, of course," she said, her voice smooth, controlled, but there was no warmth in it. "But you need to be realistic. This university is very expensive, even with your little scholarship." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I tried not to let it get to me, but I could feel the excitement draining from me, replaced by a cold sense of dread. "Julian is at a very critical point in his career," she continued, her voice never wavering. "And he needs our full support to build his brand. A lot of his success will depend on his image, the places he's seen, the things he can show his followers." My heart sank. I knew where this was going. I could feel it deep in my bones. "What are you saying, Mom?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "I'm saying," she said, leaning forward, "that we need you to be a team player. We need you to think about the family as a whole. Julian's success will benefit all of us in the long run. He has the potential to be a star. Well, you have a good head on your shoulders. You'll be fine wherever you go." It was like a punch to the gut. My dream, my future, my hard work, all of it was secondary. In that moment, I realized something. Julian wasn't just the golden boy. He was the investment. He was the one who was going to make it. And I was just a stepping stone, a means to an end. She wasn't asking me to pursue my dreams. She was asking me to give them up. "I've worked for this my whole life. Mom," I said, my voice shaking, but I held my ground. This is my chance. This is everything I have worked for. But she wasn't hearing me. We can't afford to send you to that school. Francis, she said, her tone flat. Not when Julian needs our help. This is about the family. You need to think about what's best for all of us. I felt my chest tighten. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. What about what's best for me? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What about my future? My mother just sighed, like she was explaining something to a child who didn't understand. We need you to be a team player, she repeated. This is about supporting Julian's brand. He needs our help more than you do. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had been accepted to a top-tier university, and she wanted me to throw that away. For Julian, for his brand. It wasn't even real. It wasn't even something tangible. It was all smoke and mirrors, a carefully constructed illusion. And yet, here I was, being asked to sacrifice my future for something that wasn't even real. I can't do that, Mom, I said, feeling the tears welling up. I've earned this. I've worked so hard. But it was like talking to a brick wall. My mother's mind was made up. She didn't care about my hard work. She didn't care about my future. She cared about Julian's. You need to be realistic, she said again, her voice softer now, as if trying to soothe me. You can go to a community college. It's cheaper. You can still pursue your dreams, but in a way that's more affordable for the family. We'll help you with that. The words felt like a slap in the face. A community college, a cheaper option. It was clear that to my mother, my dreams weren't worth the price of the university I had worked so hard to get into. I argued with her. I tried to reason with her, showing her spreadsheets of how we could afford the tuition if they cut back on Julian's lavish spending. I even presented a plan, showing that we could make it work if we prioritized my education for once. But no matter what I said, she wasn't listening. Julian was the priority. I was a sacrifice. You'll be fine, she said, brushing off my concerns. You're smart. You can succeed anywhere. I felt the blood drain from my face. The words she used stung. It was like she was saying my dreams didn't matter, that they weren't worth fighting for. I was just the backup, the support. I was the one who would always make sure Julian got what he wanted, no matter what. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't give up my dreams. I couldn't let her take that from me. But at the same time, I didn't know how to stand up to her. I didn't know how to tell her that I wasn't going to play the role she had written for me. In the end, I managed to negotiate a fragile compromise. I could go to my dream university, but only if I agreed to live on a shoestring budget. They would cover tuition and a small portion of my housing. But everything else, the food, the books, the social life would be on me. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was the only way to get what I had fought so hard for. And so, I accepted it. But as I packed my bags, ready to leave for college, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. My mother had made it clear that she saw me as an afterthought. My dreams, my future, they weren't important. It was all about Julian, all about his success. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for sure: the fight for my future wasn't over yet. It had just begun. The first 2 years of university were a blur of lectures, late-night study sessions, and the constant stress of financial instability, while other students were joining clubs, going to parties, and enjoying the full college experience. I was buried in spreadsheets, calculating how I could make my next payment or if I could afford the next textbook. I worked 2 part-time jobs just to make ends meet, one as a barista at a local coffee shop and another as a library assistant on campus. The work was exhausting and the hours were long, but it was the only way to keep myself afloat. There was no room for downtime. There was no room for fun. My social life consisted mostly of brief conversations with my coworkers or the occasional study group. But that was it. I watched as others casually wandered through life, talking about the latest party or the trip they had taken over the weekend, while I was calculating whether I could afford to buy a cheap lunch or if I should skip another meal to make rent. I didn't have time for the carefree college experience everyone else seemed to be having. My only real friend was Chloe, a brilliant software developer in my program who understood what it meant to struggle. Chloe came from a family that, like mine, didn't have much, and she worked hard to put herself through school with a mix of scholarships, loans, and her own part-time job. We bonded over our shared ambition, our need to succeed despite everything stacked against us. It was rare to find someone who understood the pressures of balancing work and school, and I clung to Chloe as a lifeline. She, too, was tired of the privileged kids who treated college like a 4-year vacation, just another stop on their journey to a life of leisure. Chloe and I understood what it meant to earn everything, to fight for every opportunity. But even though I had Chloe, there were times when I felt completely alone. Most days, I was running on fumes. I couldn't afford to buy new clothes, so I wore the same things over and over, trying to hide the wear and tear of years of use. I had to be resourceful, constantly, finding ways to stretch the few dollars I had. I couldn't let myself think about how unfair it all was. The more I focused on it, the more defeated I felt. The financial strain weighed on me constantly. But I had to keep going. I couldn't give up. My academics were the one area where I could escape the weight of my family's expectations and the crushing burden of my circumstances. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where my intelligence was recognized, where my work mattered. The professors in my program appreciated my dedication and my drive. They saw my potential, and that made me feel validated in a way I had never felt before. I was at the top of my class, thriving academically despite everything else that was going on in my life. But despite all my hard work and success, when I called home to share my achievements, my family couldn't seem to care. My mother, ever the picture of detachment, listened with a barely concealed sigh as I told her about my academic progress. She never seemed to take me seriously. My achievements were always met with a polite but distracted response. "That's nice, dear," she'd say, before quickly changing the subject to Julian's latest breakthrough. It didn't matter that I was at the top of my class, excelling in a field that was growing in importance and demand. What mattered to her was that Julian was, in her eyes, the star of the family. Every time I called home, the conversation inevitably turned to him, his social media career, his latest brand deal, the places he was going, and the people he was meeting. But it was all a facade, a carefully crafted illusion. My mother spoke of his success as if it were something real, as if it were something that mattered. In reality, Julian had a few thousand followers on his social media accounts, most of whom were probably bought. His content was nothing more than poorly lit photos of him posing in front of rented luxury cars, trying to convince the world that he was something he wasn't. I knew it. And deep down, I think my mother did too, but she refused to see it. She was so invested in the fantasy of Julian's success that she ignored the reality. She couldn't see past the image she had built around him. Meanwhile, I was left to pick up the pieces of my own life, to fight for every inch of success I could get. And the worst part was that even my smallest victories were always secondary to his failures. It didn't matter how much I accomplished, how much I worked, it would never be enough. I was never enough. At home, my mother was obsessed with Julian's brand. He could do no wrong in her eyes. If he crashed his car, it was the road's fault. If he failed at something, it was the world's fault. My mother constantly made excuses for him, bending over backward to make sure he didn't face any real consequences. When he failed 3 classes in high school, she blamed it on uninspired teachers who didn't understand his genius. When I won a state math competition, she didn't even bother to congratulate me. She just sighed and muttered something about how I shouldn't become one of those socially awkward types. I could never win in her eyes. No matter what I did, it was always about Julian. He was a priority, and I was the afterthought. The worst part was the financial disparity. Julian had everything handed to him on a silver platter. Designer clothes, the latest gadgets, lavish trips. Nothing was ever out of his reach. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs just to pay for a small apartment and barely scraped by. When I asked my parents for a fraction of the money Julian got, my mother would give me a lecture on financial responsibility, completely ignoring the thousands of dollars she was spending on Julian's brand. It was suffocating, and the emotional toll was unbearable. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the way my family treated me, the way they valued me. I was an afterthought, a side character in their story. Julian was the main character, and I was just there to support him, to play my role as the reliable, steady daughter who would always be in the background. But I was done with that. I couldn't keep living my life like this. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like I didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I realized that I had to put myself first. I couldn't keep sacrificing my future for Julian's fantasy. It was a hard truth to swallow, but it was the truth. I had to fight for my dreams, even if it meant fighting against my family's expectations. And so I did. I kept pushing forward, despite everything. I kept excelling academically, even though it felt like no one cared. I kept working 2 jobs, even though it was exhausting. I kept moving forward, one step at a time. I knew that the future I wanted was worth fighting for, even if my family couldn't see it, even if they never would. The summer break after my sophomore year came, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to breathe. I was back home, but this time felt different. My mom, dad, and Julian were still the same, but the atmosphere was thick, charged with an unease I couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it, tried to fall back into old routines, but something was off. The house felt quieter, somehow. When I arrived, I didn't get the usual rushed hugs from my mom or the playful banter from Julian. Instead, I was met with a strange, tense silence. My mom didn't greet me like she usually did, and my dad wasn't home much, as usual. It felt like there was a storm brewing, one I didn't fully understand. I tried to ignore it at first, assuming it was just the usual summer tension. But then, my mom cornered me in the kitchen one evening, her face pale, eyes shadowed with stress. I could tell something was wrong, but I had no idea how wrong it was. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. Her calm demeanor only heightened the anxiety that churned in my stomach. She looked at me with that same practiced expression, the one she used when she was about to say something that would rattle me. I braced myself. My heart raced in anticipation of whatever was coming. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, my voice thick with apprehension. She exhaled sharply, her hand trembling as she poured herself a glass of water. I couldn't tell if it was the pressure of the moment or something else that made her act this way, but it unsettled me. She finally spoke, and the words she said would haunt me forever. "We've overextended ourselves," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The cost of funding Julian's lifestyle, his brand, it's become unsustainable." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My brain couldn't process them at first. What was she talking about? "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. But my mother wasn't finished. "We've maxed out the credit cards," she continued, her voice tightening. "We had to take out a second mortgage on the house. We're on the brink of financial ruin." I was stunned. I just stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. I had always known my parents were living beyond their means. But this was something entirely different. They were in deep. This wasn't just about their financial habits. This was about something much bigger. I had no idea how bad it was, but it was Julian. It was always Julian. "What happened?" I finally managed to ask. My voice barely a whisper. My mother, her eyes heavy with guilt, told me everything. They had been funding Julian's brand for years, paying for everything from his clothes to his photo shoots to the networking trips that supposedly helped him build his empire. All of it was being funded on borrowed money. Julian's dream was their debt. His success was their financial collapse. It made sense now, why things felt so off, why I had felt so uncomfortable during my visit. The walls of their financial bubble were closing in. I wasn't sure whether I should be angry or devastated. And then came the punchline, the part that would shake me to my core. "Francis," she said, her voice tight with desperation, "we need you to drop out of college, just for a year or two, get a full-time job. We need your income to help us stay afloat." The air in the room seemed to go still, as if the world had paused for a moment. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing to my ears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to drop out?" I asked, barely able to form the words. It felt like a bad joke. "We need you to help us, Francis," she continued, her voice steady but laced with an edge of desperation. "You're smart. You can always go back to school later, but we need your help now. Julian's career, it's at a critical point. We can't let him fail. This is the final push." I can feel the anger rising in me, burning in the pit of my stomach. "You want me to give up everything I've worked for," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "So you can fund Julian's, his career?" The words felt like venom on my tongue. My mother didn't even blink. It's not just about Julian, she said, her voice cold and methodical. This is about the family. We all need to make sacrifices to help him succeed. The reality of the situation hit me like a slap in the face. They wanted me to sacrifice my future for Julian's fantasy. And it wasn't even about the money anymore. It wasn't just about me giving up my dream, my education, my future, my chance at something real. It was about how little they valued me, how little they cared for what I had worked for. It was all about Julian. It had always been about Julian. This isn't fair, Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I've worked my ass off to get where I am. This is my future. You can't just take that away from me. My mother didn't flinch. Her face remained impassive, as if she had expected me to say this, as if it were a part of the script. We're asking you to be a team player, she said, her tone still cold, still detached. This isn't about your future, Francis. It's about our family's future. I won't do it, I said, finally finding my voice, finally standing my ground. I won't drop out. I won't give up everything I've worked for just to prop up Julian's fake career. The words felt like a victory, but they came with a weight I wasn't prepared for. My mother's eyes hardened, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her I had never seen before, a complete lack of empathy. "You're being selfish," she spat, her voice rising. "You're tearing this family apart. Julian needs us, and you can't even make this small sacrifice for him." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, frustration, and something darker. This wasn't about Julian needing help. This wasn't about me being selfish. This was about my mother's delusion that everything had to be sacrificed for Julian's success. It was about her ignoring everything I had worked for, everything I had achieved, just because Julian's brand mattered more to her. "I'm done," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not sacrificing my future for him anymore. I've given enough." The silence between us felt suffocating, but I knew what I had to do. For the first time in my life, I drew the line. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let them use me as a pawn in their game. It was over. My mother stood there for a long moment, her face twisted in disbelief. I could see the fury behind her eyes, but I didn't flinch. "You're making a huge mistake," she finally said, her voice cold, almost indifferent. "You're being ungrateful." I looked at her, finally seeing her for what she was, a woman who had spent my whole life using me to prop up her own illusions. "I'm not making a mistake," I said, my voice steady. "I'm taking control of my life, and I'm done letting you use me." I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like I had just done the hardest thing I would ever have to do, but it was the right thing. I had made my choice for the first time in my life. I chose me. After that conversation with my mother, I felt like I was drowning. The weight of the decision, the lies, and the pressure to maintain the facade, it all started to feel too much. I had refused to give up my future, but in the process, I realized I had to create a life that my family would believe. I couldn't just cut ties with them completely, not yet. So, I began to build this double life, a life of deception, where I pretended to drop out of college and worked a menial job, all while secretly continuing my studies. I knew it would be exhausting, that it would take everything I had, but I also knew it was my only option. The first step was convincing my family that I had fallen in line with their expectations. I told them I had gotten a job as an administrative assistant at a big, soulless corporation. I needed something that would sound plausible, something they would believe without question. I even printed out a fake offer letter from a company that looked professional enough to fool them. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover my living expenses and send them a portion of the money each month. The number I promised them wasn't too much, but it was just enough to keep them quiet, to placate them without completely breaking my bank. The next step was to sever all ties with the university. I blocked my mother and Julian on every social media platform, telling them that a new company policy required me to keep a low profile online. The excuse was flimsy, but I knew they wouldn't question it. My family had always been tech illiterate, and they didn't care about my social media presence. They only cared about what I could give them. The hardest part, though, was maintaining the lie. I had to go through the motions, pretending to be someone I wasn't, living a life that felt so foreign to me. Every Sunday, I'd call my mother, and we'd have the same rehearsed conversation. I'd tell her about my new job, about my coworkers, about how tiring it all was. I'd tell her about my imaginary struggles at work, how difficult my bosses were, how soul-crushing the work was. I had to make it sound convincing, like a person whose dreams had been put on hold. I'd listen as my mother asked about Julian's latest ventures, his social media career that was supposedly taking off. And each time, my heart would sink. Because I knew it was all a lie. I was living a lie, but I had no choice. I couldn't let them know the truth. The truth would destroy everything I had worked for. And so, I lived this double life, a ghost in my own family's eyes. Every day, I played a part, pretending to be someone I wasn't. At night, when I should have been resting, I'd go to the university library, studying for my courses, attending lectures, working on my assignments. I couldn't let my grades slip. I couldn't let anything give me away. The pressure was immense. I had to keep up appearances at home and at work, while also maintaining my grades and academic standing. My days were a blur of exhaustion, moving between my part-time job, the library, and my small apartment. I'd wake up early, put on the bland office clothes I'd bought for this fake job, and leave for the office. I'd take the bus towards the city, but get off a few stops early, walking the rest of the way to the university library. It became my safe space, my sanctuary where no one could find me, where I could still be a student. I had to be careful, though I had to move like a shadow, always keeping an eye on the time, always making sure no one would see me. I couldn't risk anyone from my family or worse, from the university finding out what I was really doing. My only respite from this madness came when I was with Chloe. She had become my rock, my confidant in this tangled web of lies. Chloe was the only person who knew the truth. I had to trust her, and she had never let me down. She was the only one who knew the real story behind my administrative assistant job. She would cover for me in study groups when I had to leave early to make one of those fake work calls. She'd send me notes if I had to miss a class. She was my ally, my secret keeper. It was Chloe who helped me keep my sanity, especially during those long nights when the weight of the lie threatened to crush me. She'd remind me to take a break, to get some rest, to not let the stress swallow me whole. Her support was the only thing that made it possible for me to keep going. But even with her help, it was hard. I was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder. I had to be so careful not to slip up, not to give myself away. The emotional toll was exhausting. I would lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the lies I had told, worrying that one day they would catch up to me. I was living in constant fear of being found out. And yet, despite all the strain, despite the exhaustion, I refused to let go of my education. This was the future I had fought for. This was the life I had dreamed of. And no amount of manipulation from my family would take it from me. It wasn't just about getting through the courses. It wasn't just about the degree. It was about proving to myself that I could do this, that I could succeed on my own terms. I worked hard in every class, spent countless hours studying, attending office hours, and making sure my work was the best it could be. I was thriving academically, but the burden of the lie weighed heavily on me. I had to keep everything under wraps. I couldn't let anyone see the cracks, see how much I was struggling to hold it all together. But even though the pressure was unbearable at times, I kept going. I had to. Every day was a battle, but each small victory, each grade I earned, each project I completed was a reminder that I was doing the right thing. Despite the emotional toll, despite the lies, I was still fighting for my future. And that, in the end, was what mattered. I couldn't let my family dictate my path any longer. I had to take control of my own life, no matter how hard it was. And so, I continued to walk this tightrope, balancing my fake life at home with my real one at school. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way I could make it work. And every day I spent in the library, every time I finished a project or aced a test, I felt a little closer to the future I wanted, a future that was mine and mine alone. The day it all came crashing down was the day I least expected it. I had been living this double life for so long, carefully balancing the lie with my academic success, that I started to believe I could keep it up forever. But, as it often happens, the truth has a way of slipping through the cracks, and that day, it slipped. It all started with a simple social media post. Julian had been at some overpriced rooftop bar, surrounded by his friends, the ones who'd always flattered him and fed into his delusion of grandeur. I'd been checking in on his life through a burner account, just to see how deep he was digging himself into his own lie. It was a photo of him and his friends, glasses raised in a cheesy toast. The caption read, "Celebrating the next big thing. Big moves coming soon." Nothing new there. Same old. Same old. But it was the location tag that caught my eye. It was tagged right near the campus. Just a few blocks from the university I had worked so hard to keep a secret from my family. Panic gripped me. I could feel my chest tightening as I read the words over and over, trying to understand how he had ended up so close to my world that I'd kept so carefully hidden from him and the rest of the family. I texted Chloe in a frenzy. She immediately understood the gravity of the situation. "Stay at your aunt's," she wrote back. "Don't go near campus. I'll keep an eye out." But the damage had already been done. My life, my two worlds, were about to collide in a way I couldn't control. For the next 2 days, I was a nervous wreck. I stayed hidden at Aunt Isabel's house, studying and trying to calm my nerves. Chloe sent me updates, each one more distressing than the last. "Spotted? She texted me one afternoon. He's at the coffee shop by the university. He's talking to someone. Looks like he might be with a professor. My heart sank. Professor Jensen. He was a friendly, chatty man, someone who knew me well from my stats class. If he had mentioned my name to Julian, if he had recognized the connection, there was no telling what would happen. The possibility of everything unraveling became real, and I had no way of stopping it. I could only wait, paralyzed. But within an hour, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was low, sharp with accusation. "Francis," she hissed, "I just had a very interesting phone call from your brother." I felt the blood drain from my face. I already knew where this was going. "He was in your part of town today," my mother continued. "And who should he bump into but Mr. Jensen, your professor, the one from your advanced stats class." My heart stopped. I knew what she was about to say. "He said he had a brilliant student in his class, someone who's top of the class at the university." There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her smirking. "The university you were supposed to have dropped out of 2 years ago." Her voice was low and cold now, like a dagger being twisted. "You've been lying to us, Francis. You've been lying this whole time." The words hit me harder than I expected. The reality of the moment, the fact that my carefully constructed lies had been exposed, washed over me. I had been living in fear of this very moment for so long. The truth was out. There was no point in denying it. I had been caught. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, despite the storm raging inside me. "I have been lying to you." The scream on the other end of the phone was primal. My mother's fury was uncontainable, an explosion of rage and betrayal. "How dare you!" she screamed. "How could you do this to us?" Her words were a blur in my mind as I tried to focus. Julian's voice echoed in the background, faint but unmistakable, calling me a liar, a traitor, accusing me of stealing from him. He couldn't understand. He was too blinded by his own ego. The emotional explosion from my family was everything I had feared, and the accusations, the insults, the emotional blackmail. My mother's voice, dripping with anger, demanded that I apologize, that I come clean and fix everything I had broken. But as I stood there, listening to her rant, something inside me snapped. I realized I wasn't going to apologize for living my own life, for fighting for my own future. The emotional burden had been too much for too long. I'd carried it for years, and now I was done. "I'm not going to apologize for choosing my future," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going to fix anything because I haven't done anything wrong." There was a long pause, and then my mother's voice came through the line again, icy and controlled. "You're selfish, Francis. You're tearing this family apart." Her words cut, but they also gave me clarity. I wasn't the one tearing the family apart. They were. Their manipulation, their expectation that I would sacrifice everything for Julian's image, that was what had torn us apart. I wasn't the one holding us together. I had been the one holding myself together, and it had taken everything in me to get to this point. I wasn't going to let them break me anymore. I wasn't going to sacrifice my life for their delusions. I looked around at Aunt Isabel's warm, book-filled house, and I felt something shift inside me. It was time to walk away. The confrontation ended with my mother's final, venomous words. "You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back." But I wasn't going to crawl back. I was done. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, and I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I'd been so afraid of losing them, of disappointing them. But now I realized something I was already lost to them. I had been lost to them for years, and I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their expectations. That night, I made a decision. I was going to take control of my life. No more lies, no more pretending. I didn't need their approval to be happy or successful. I didn't need to be their sacrificial lamb anymore. I had my own future to build, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. The next morning, I packed my things and made arrangements to move into a small apartment near the university. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every step away from my family felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't just walking away from them, I was walking towards my future. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from their control. Free to be myself, to build a life that was truly mine. I wasn't going to look back anymore. I was moving forward, and there was nothing they could do to stop me. Graduation day arrived, and I stood there in my cap and gown, a sense of quiet triumph flooding me. The ceremony was long and filled with the usual speeches and applause. But for me, it was so much more than that. It wasn't just about earning a degree. It was about everything I had fought for, everything I had endured to get to this moment. It was the culmination of years of hard work, not just academically, but emotionally. The sacrifices, the lies, the pain I had pushed through it all to stand there on my own 2 feet, ready to step into the world. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I couldn't help but think back to all the moments that had brought me to this point. The battles with my family, the constant pressure to conform to their expectations, and the lies I had to tell to protect my dreams. But that day, I was finally free. The applause of my classmates and friends filled my ears, but the loudest sound in my mind was my own victory. When my name was called, I shook the dean's hand and accepted my diploma, feeling the weight of it settle into my hands. It was mine. It was a symbol of my journey, a journey I had taken on my own terms. And when I walked back to my seat, my eyes instinctively searched the crowd, expecting to see my family. But they weren't there in the way I had hoped. In the back of the auditorium, near the main exit, I saw them, my mother, my father, and Julian. But they weren't smiling. My mother stood with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face a mask of anger and disappointment. Julian, bored and resentful, was scrolling through his phone, as if this moment meant nothing to him. My father just looked small and sad, a shadow of the man he used to be. They had come, but not to celebrate. They had come to confront me, to remind me of their bitterness. For a split second, my heart clenched. The thought of them being there, their faces full of disdain, was overwhelming. But then, something shifted inside me. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this day wasn't for them. It was for me. I had earned it, and I wasn't going to let them ruin it. I turned away, focusing on the ceremony, soaking in the moments that were mine. When the ceremony ended and the crowd spilled out into the sunlight, I knew the confrontation was coming. My mother wasted no time. She marched straight up to me, her voice sharp, cutting through the happy chatter around us. "Francis," she said, her tone venomous. "We need to talk." I felt Aunt Isabel and Chloe step up beside me, their silent support a shield I didn't even have to ask for. My mother tried to pull me aside, but I stood my ground. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Nothing to talk about," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "You lied to us for 2 years. You stole from this family." I could feel the anger welling up inside me, but I refused to let it take over. "That money wasn't stealing," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "It was mine. I earned it. Every dollar I sent you, I earned with 2 jobs and scholarships. I didn't steal anything." My mother's face flushed red with fury. "That money was supposed to go to Julian. You were supposed to help him." "Help him?" I laughed bitterly, the reality of it all sinking in. "Your precious golden boy is living a lie, Mom. He hasn't earned a thing. You've spent years funding his fake career, his fake life, and all I ever heard was how I needed to support him." Julian, who had been standing quietly behind my mother, finally spoke up, his voice dripping with entitlement. "You're just jealous. Francis, you're jealous of my success." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Success? What success? The only thing Julian had was a fabricated image, funded by my hard work and my parents' credit cards. "You want to talk about success, Julian?" I asked, turning to face him. "Your whole life is a joke. You've been living off of my sacrifices, and now you're blaming me for everything." Julian flushed a deep red, unable to form a proper response. "Don't you want to help the family?" he spat, still trying to pull me into his delusion. But that was the moment I knew everything had changed. I was done. I had spent my whole life being the one who sacrificed for them, the one who gave up everything for their dreams. And now, I was done. I turned back to my mother, her face still twisted in anger, and I said the words I had been holding in for so long. "You are no longer my mother. You're just a woman I used to know, and I don't need you in my life anymore." It felt like a weight lifting from my chest. My heart pounded in my ears, but the relief was undeniable. I had finally cut myself free. My mother's mouth hung open, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The damage was done. I had made my choice, and as I turned my back on them, I felt something in me shift. I was no longer the person who had spent years fighting for their approval. I was no longer the person who had lived for their expectations. I was my own person, free to live my life on my own terms. I walked away from that moment, from that family, and I never looked back. I walked towards Aunt Isabel, who had tears in her eyes, and Chloe, who grinned at me like we had just won a victory together. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. I moved into a small apartment near the city, a place I could finally call my own. I was free, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly living. I poured everything I had into my career. After graduation, I landed a job as a data analyst at a growing tech company. It wasn't just a job, it was my opportunity to prove to myself that I could succeed. Not because of anyone else, but because of me. And I did. I excelled at work, earning respect and recognition from my peers. I was building a life that was mine, completely separate from the toxic expectations of my family. Aunt Isabel continued to be my rock. She checked in on me regularly, offering her quiet wisdom and unwavering support. Chloe remained by my side, helping me celebrate every small victory and reminding me that I wasn't alone in this new chapter. As I moved forward in my career, I found myself reflecting on everything I had been through. I had fought so hard to escape the shadow of my family's control, and now I was standing tall, in control of my own destiny. It wasn't easy. It was never going to be easy. But I had learned the most important lesson of all: I was enough. And I had the power to build the life I had always dreamed of, on my terms, with no one to tell me otherwise.